Love isn't random. Attraction isn't a chance. Part 1 opened the eyes of thousands of men. For the first time, they saw the hidden rules buried so deep in psychology that they shape every spark, every fight, every heartbreak. But if you thought Part 1 gave you the whole truth, you were only scratching the surface. That's the dangerous trap. Many men walked away thinking, "Now I get it." But Part 1 was just the opening act. The darker instincts, the forces that drive desire, were still hidden. Think about it. Why do some women run straight into the arms of men they know will hurt them? Why does the safe guy, steady and reliable, still lose to the reckless one? Why does she forget the man who looked perfect on paper, but never forget the one who shook her core? Here's the punchline. Not safety, but thrill grabs attention. Not logic, but instinct makes the choice. Not chaos forever, but character keeps the fire alive. Let me give you a quick case. A friend of mine did everything right. He was stable, loyal, always there. She told him, "You're exactly what I should want." And yet, she left. Not for someone better, for someone who was unpredictable, magnetic, and dangerous. That's when I realized this isn't random. It's coded. And that's why tonight, we're going deeper. Past the illusions, past the comforting lies, into the uncomfortable truths that explain why love feels so powerful and so dangerous. You'll see why danger feels like dominance, why desire flips between safety and excitement, why stress exposes truths people can't hide, and why memory and fear leave scars that last a lifetime. So here's my ask. Send this to a brother who needs to hear it. Tag a friend who's been burned by love. Because these secrets don't just open eyes, they save years of confusion. By the end, love won't look magical anymore. It won't look random. It will look inevitable. So sit back, put on your headphones, stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you see attraction forever. Why do women chase the men they shouldn't? Back in 2010, psychologists asked a question most people avoid. Why are so many women drawn to men who are clearly bad for them? Not just flawed men, but dangerous ones. Men whose personalities destroy trust, create chaos, and leave scars. Researchers called this cluster the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. On paper, these are toxic red flags. Every bit of logic says women should run. But in controlled experiments, women often rated men with these traits as more attractive, at least for short-term encounters. Here's the paradox. The same qualities that make these men dangerous dominants. Boldness, risk-taking, reckless charm can also look like confidence and power. To the primal brain, danger can feel like dominance. Chaos can feel like excitement. And in that split second, instinct moves faster than logic. Not logic, but instinct sparks the reaction. Not safety, but thrill grabs attention. Not chaos forever, but character creates legacy. Let me give you a quick case. A friend of mine was the safe guy, loyal, steady, reliable. Everyone said he was the perfect choice. Yet she left. Not for someone kinder, for someone reckless, someone magnetic. The attraction burned hot, but it burned out just as fast. That's the truth. What men miss, the fire that pulls her in is also the fire that consumes everything. And here's the lesson. If you chase cheap power manipulation, arrogance, chaos, you lose. You might win attention for a night, but you won't win respect. And without respect, you'll be forgotten. What lasts isn't danger. It's depth, strength with wisdom, confidence with control, boldness with integrity. That combination doesn't just attract, it imprints memory. Pause here. Have you seen this play out? A friend falling for the bad boy. Maybe you've felt that. Pull yourself. Drop a comment. Share your story. Because you're not alone. Because here's the real shift. The unforgettable man is the one who understands both light and shadow, who commands presence without chaos, who sparks excitement, but also builds trust. Attraction can fade, but legacy lasts. And if you think that's fascinating, wait until you see what comes next. Because the dark triad is just one side of the story. Desire itself is split in two: security on one side, excitement on the other. Most men fail because they only embody one. But the rare man who masters both, he becomes impossible to forget. So let's move into part 2, the two faces of desire. Desire is a paradox, and most men never see it. I knew a man who was steady, loyal, always reliable, the kind of man who should have been every woman's dream. And for a while, she told him exactly that you're everything I need. But months later, she left. Not for someone more stable, not for someone more caring, for a man who was unpredictable, magnetic, and just a little dangerous. That's when he realized the painful truth. Stability alone isn't enough. Desire has two faces. On one side is security. Women crave safety, reliability, and emotional steadiness. A man who feels like a harbor in the storm. Someone she can lean on when the world feels uncertain. This kind of man builds trust, builds comfort, and builds lasting bonds. But on the other side lies excitement, the thrill of unpredictability, the spark of mystery, the energy of dominance. Women are often pulled sometimes without realizing why toward men who make their hearts race. The man who walks into a room and instantly shifts the atmosphere. The man whose presence feels like fire. Here's the paradox. Not stability alone, but balance creates attraction. Not thrill alone, but control makes it last. Not either or, but both. That's what makes a man unforgettable. Most men fail because they only embody one side. The safe guy becomes predictable and forgettable. The exciting guy burns bright, but burns out. The rare man merges both. He is stability without boredom, excitement without chaos. He is both sanctuary and storm. And that paradox makes him impossible to replace. Here's a quick case. One woman told researchers, "My husband is my rock, but my boyfriend was my fire." That single sentence captures the paradox. Stability makes her stay. Excitement makes her feel alive. The unforgettable man gives her both. Pause for a moment. Have you ever been the safe guy who got overlooked, or the thrill who couldn't last? Comment below. I want to know which side you've lived. Because here's the truth. Most men get remembered only until someone new comes along. But the man who embodies both sides leaves an imprint she can't erase. He becomes the story she tells years later, long after he's gone. And if desire is a paradox, then stress is the magnifying glass that reveals it. Stress strips away masks. It shows who people really are when the pressure rises. And once you see the difference between how men and women respond, you'll understand more about relationships than most men ever will. So let's move into part 3, stress men versus women. Stress doesn't just test people, it reveals them. I once saw a couple nearly break over something small. He didn't reply to her text for hours. To him, it was nothing. He was busy. He figured she'd understand. But to her, that silence felt heavy. It wasn't about the message, it was about connection. That moment showed me something most men don't see. Men and women often process stress in completely different ways. For decades, Psychologists told us the same story: fight or flight, confront the threat or escape it. They believed it applied to everyone. But in 2000, Shelley Taylor and her team at UCLA discovered something shocking. Women often follow a third path. Instead of fighting or fleeing, they turn to tend and befriend. Think about ancient life. For men, facing threats often meant fight or flight hunt, protect, defend. For women, running wasn't always an option. Fighting could be fatal. So biology shaped another survival code: build alliances, form bonds, seek safety in numbers. That wiring still shows up today in ways most men overlook. Here's the twist: not weakness, but wisdom shapes her stress response. Not drama, but survival drives her emotion. Not gossip, but connection keeps her alive. When stress hits, many men shut down or lash out. Women often reach out, communicating, seeking reassurance, forming bonds. And this is where men usually fail. They misread her signals. They call it overthinking. They dismiss it as drama. But those reactions are instincts carved by evolution. They're not flaws, they're strategies. Mini case. In one study, women under stress were more likely to call a friend, while men were more likely to isolate. Neither response is wrong, but the difference explains why partners often clash in tense moments. She wants to talk. He wants to disappear. Pause for a second. Have you ever misread her reaction, thinking she was exaggerating? Drop a yes if you've been there, because almost every man has. Here's the real lesson. Stress is a magnifying glass. It doesn't lie. It strips away masks and shows you who someone really is. Ignore it, and you'll stay blind. Misread it, and you'll feed conflict. But learn to read it, and you unlock clarity most men never reach. And if stress is the magnifying glass, memory is the recorder. Because women don't just live through moments, they store them. Every word, every gesture, every silence. And that memory can either build trust or destroy it forever. So let's move into part 4, the hidden memory advantage. She doesn't just remember you, she records you. A man once told me, she keeps bringing up things from months ago, like it just happened yesterday. He thought she was holding a grudge, but he was wrong. She wasn't holding on, she was remembering. Because one of the most underestimated forces in attraction isn't beauty, charm, or status. It's memory. Research in cognitive psychology shows that women, on average, have a hidden advantage in emotional memory. They don't just recall events, they recall details. The way your voice rose, the flicker in your eyes, the pause before you answered. Even the smallest shifts are stored, sometimes forever. And here's the twist. Not promises, but patterns build trust. Not beauty, but memory shapes attraction. Not words alone, but actions recorded decide your legacy. This memory works both ways. The night you showed kindness when no one else did, still there. The moment you encouraged her when she doubted herself, etched in. But so are the careless jokes, the broken promises, the silences when she needed words. Those scars don't vanish. Men often dismiss it as overthinking. But it's not drama, it's biology. Mini case. In one study, women recalled emotional events more vividly and accurately than men. Even a year later, they didn't just remember what was said, they remembered the feeling of it. That emotional recall silently shapes attraction and trust. Pause here. Have you ever had her bring up something you thought was small, but to her, it still burned? Yes, if you've lived this, you'll realize you're not alone. Here's the real lesson. Every word is a seed. every action is proof. And over time, those seeds grow into the story she tells herself about you. Speak with intention. Act with awareness. Because she doesn't just hear you, she records you. She doesn't just see you, she remembers you. She doesn't just feel your actions, she preserves them. And that's why some men become unforgettable, while others fade fast. Now ask yourself this: if memory is this powerful, what does it reveal about attraction at the deepest level? Why do women across every culture consistently seek men who are equal or above in strength, status, and value? That answer lies in one of the most controversial truths in psychology: hypergamy. So let's step into part 5, the power of hypergamy. She doesn't just choose, she calculates. A man once told me, I gave her everything. My time, my loyalty, my effort. But in the end, she left me for someone with more status, more power. He thought it was betrayal, but science has another word for it: hypergamy, the instinct to marry up. In 2017, David Buss and his team studied attraction across the globe, from New York to Nigeria, Tokyo to small towns in India. The pattern was clear. Women consistently preferred men who matched or exceeded them in status, resources, or influence. Even today, when independence is stronger than ever, the instinct still shows. Biology doesn't vanish just because culture evolves. Why? Because for thousands of years, a partner wasn't just romance, he was survival. Food, protection, safety, a future for her children. Choosing wrong could mean struggle or worse. Those pressures carved instincts that still drive attraction today. And here's the punchline: not vanity, but survival shaped hypergamy. Not betrayal, but biology drives the choice. Not resentment, but growth flips the game. Mini case. Researchers found that women in developing societies leaned heavily on financial security, while women in wealthier nations placed more value on ambition and social intelligence. Different expressions. Same instinct: seek the man who secures the future. Most men respond with anger. They call it shallow, transactional, unfair. But here's the truth. Hypergamy isn't the enemy, it's the mirror. It reflects your current value. You can resent it, or you can rise. The man who builds himself doesn't chase attention, he attracts it. He doesn't beg for respect, he commands it. Others orbit him because his presence is undeniable. Attraction doesn't reward weakness. It rewards strength, growth, and vision. Pause for a second. Have you ever felt replaced by someone with more power or presence? Drop a comment if you've lived this. You're not alone. Here's the real lesson. Don't fight the instinct. Use it. Let it drive you to sharpen your edge, elevate your worth, and become impossible to overlook. When you rise high enough, hypergamy has no choice but to bend in your favor. But even when men rise, another force still shapes relationships, a quieter one. Not rejection, not betrayal, but the fear that shakes women to their core, the fear of abandonment. So let's step into part 6, the fear of abandonment. Her deepest fear isn't rejection, it's disappearance. I once heard a woman whisper, "I don't care if he's busy. I just need to feel he's still here." To most men, that sounds small, but to her, it was everything. Because the hidden fear that drives many women isn't cheating, and it isn't rejection. It's abandonment, the fear that one day, the man she depends on will simply stop caring. In 2008, attachment researchers uncovered this truth. Both men and women fear rejection, but women consistently reported higher anxiety about abandonment, not just physical absence, but emotional absence. The unread text, the silence after a fight, the shift in tone that suddenly feels cold. To him, it looks like nothing. To her, it feels like collapse. And here's the punchline. Not drama, but wiring fuels this fear. Not weakness, but survival shaped this instinct. Not chasing, but consistency makes her feel safe. Think about history. For millions of years, women's survival depended on reliable bonds. If emotional connection broke, protection and resources vanished. Emotional presence wasn't luxury. It was life or death. That coding still lives inside her today. Many Case 1 study showed women under stress had stronger physiological reactions to perceived abandonment than men. Their heart rates spiked, cortisol surged, even when the absence was as small as delayed communication. It's not overreaction, it's biology. So here's the lesson most men miss. Presence is not optional. A man who stays calm when emotions run high, who speaks when silence feels heavy, who remains steady when fear rises, that man becomes unforgettable. Not because he clings, but because he anchors. Pause. Have you ever seen her panic over something you thought was small? Comment. Yes, if this hit home. Because once you see it, you'll never call it drama again. Presence is more than being there physically. It's a magnet. A silent signal that says, I'm not going anywhere. And the smallest signs of presence can calm her deepest fear, just as the smallest signs of absence can trigger it. That's why the man who masters presence doesn't just win love. He leaves an imprint, and now the bigger picture comes together. Hidden desires, the paradox of attraction, stress as a magnifying glass, memory as a recorder, hypergamy as a mirror, and abandonment as the storm beneath it all. These aren't random. They're the architecture of love, attraction, and connection. So let's bring it all together in the final chapter. A man once messaged me after part 1. He wrote, I thought I understood women. I thought being nice, loyal, and stable was enough. But after watching your video, I realized I've been blind my whole life. That message captures everything this journey is about. Because now, you've seen what most men never do. The dangerous pull of the dark triad. The paradox of desire, safety versus excitement. Stress as the magnifying glass that reveals instincts. Memory as the recorder that never forgets. Hypergamy as the mirror that reflects your value. And the fear of abandonment, the storm hidden beneath it all. Here's the big idea. Attraction has never been random. Love has never been chance. Relationships don't just happen. They are shaped by instincts older than civilization, wired by evolution, and filtered through culture. Every spark, every fight, every heartbreak you've ever lived carried traces of these forces. Not illusion, but reality drives love. Not shortcuts, but growth makes you unforgettable. Not words, but patterns decide your legacy. That's the power of awareness. Once you see these truths, you can't unsee them. Every relationship begins to look different. Every argument makes more sense. The chaos of love transforms into a map, and that map gives you power. But here's the warning. Power cuts both ways. You can use this knowledge to play games, manipulate, and burn bridges. Or you can use it to grow, to lead, to build bonds that actually last. The choice is always yours. Pause for a second if this video gave you even one insight. Type helpful in the comments. Send this to a brother who needs to hear it. Tag a friend who's been burned by love. Because the more you share, the more men wake up. And let me say this personally, if anything I said came across as harsh, I apologize. I'm still learning, still growing, just like you. Everything I share comes from research, curiosity, and the drive to help, not to judge, not to harm. So thank you for your attention, your energy, your trust. That means more than you know. And remember, life doesn't wait. Opportunities don't knock twice. Every day, you either evolve or you stay stuck. The man who keeps learning, questioning, adapting, he becomes untouchable.